بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم اغفر لنا ولشيخنا ولجميع المسلمين. قال المؤلف رحمه الله: ومس ذكر متصل أو قبل بظهر كفه أو بطنه ولمسهما من خنثى مشكل، ولمس ذكر ذكره أو أنثى قبله لشهوة فيهما، ومسه امرأة بشهوة أو تمسه بها، ومس حلقة دبر لا مس شعر وسن وظفر وأمرض ولا مع حائل ولا ملموس بدنه ولو وجد منه شهوة، وينقض غسل ميت وأكل اللحم خاصة من الجزور وكل ما أوجب غسلا أوجب وضوءا إلا الموت.
الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد. We pick up in the bab of nawaqid al-wudu'. This bab actually covers three things. One, what invalidates the wudu'. Second, what do you do in a situation of doubt about wudu'? And third, what things are you not permitted to do when you're not in a state of wudu'? Actually, this bab covers these three things. Tayyib. We are discussing the first of these three, which is the invalidators of wudu'. What invalidates your wudu'? So we talked about the things where there is ijma', what comes out of sabilain, and those things where there is some khilaf about that which is najis that comes out of the rest of the body and so on. Today we pick up with the third thing you could number in this way. So the first being anything tahir or najis that comes out of the two paths. That's the first, ijma'an. Tayyib. The second thing, a large amount of najasa that comes out of the rest of the body. The difference there, if something tahir comes out of the rest of the body, like for example snot or balgham, phlegm or these kinds of things, then those do not invalidate the wudu'. Why? Because there's no dalil. But something that is najis and a large amount that comes out of the rest of the body, we talked about that. So that was the second thing. Third, zawalul aqli illa yasir al-nawmin min qa'idin aw qa'imin. So the third is when you lose your senses, meaning when you become in a state where you are no longer attentive, awake, able, right? And this can take many forms. And there is an exception here that the muallif mentions, except a light sleep of the one who is either standing or sitting or standing. So let's talk about first what all can this include. So deep sleep, that's obvious. But what about somebody who faints to being unconscious? Meaning, not somebody who just gets a little lightheaded and is falling. No, but if somebody faints, they are out, right? Somebody's just cold. In that state, they are like the one who is in a deep sleep. Meaning, if somebody faints and they're out, like they didn't just get lightheaded, they are out. If they pass gas or whatever else, they would not know. So this is also included here. What else is here? Losing one's sanity. If somebody goes insane, may Allah protect us all. But the one who is insane would not know whether they have invalidated the wudu or not. So they are like the one who is sleeping in this sense. For example, somebody is in a coma. If they wake up from a coma, then they are not in a state of wudu. Also included in this is somebody who's intoxicated. If somebody gets intoxicated, which is haram to begin. Now, a lot of things we're going to mention today may be haram in and of themselves as well. Just because we're discussing them under masail doesn't mean it's okay to do. But there are people who do haram things, so then we have to discuss what it affects their ibadah. So if somebody gets intoxicated, may Allah protect us all and all of the Muslims from this, it does invalidate their wudu, because in a state of being intoxicated, they don't know whether they peed on themselves or whether they let out gas or things like this. It's a very disgusting state. May Allah protect the ummah from it. But this is also included here. As Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan and Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, other Imma and ulama have explained in their shuruh of Zad al-Mustaqni. Tayyib, now regarding the aqwal of ulama, regarding deep sleep and it breaking wudu or not, the Jumhur al-ulama today, like for the Ahnaf and Shawafi and Malik and Hanabila, they're on the same page. But there was some khilaf, and I want to mention it just for you to understand. Amongst the aqwal of ulama, one was that all sleep breaks the wudu. Any sleep, even light sleep, even if you're just sitting down and you kind of doze out and you're asleep. Now, there is a difference between nodding and being asleep. And this is very important, because most people skip this when they study mutun of fiqh, but this is fardul ayn on you to know. For example, if you are sitting in this dars, and one of my shuyukh gave this example, so I still remember it from his dars back in 2004. He said, you're sitting in front of me and you start to nod like this. Sinataw, as we mentioned about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is not considered naum. This is not considered sleep. Then there is a sleep where you are asleep. Let's say you're sitting in the dars and you're asleep. You're not nodding, you're asleep, but you are pretty much aware of what's going on. Meaning, if I'm like Adam, not that Adam ever sleeps in the dars, but I'm saying an example. If I just told him, what was I talking about? He'd still be able to kind of catch up and know where he's at. He's not out, even though he was asleep. He's not nodding. That's called a light sleep. And then there is deep sleep. Deep sleep, you forget where you are. You forget what we're talking about. You are, sometimes in Jum'ah, you see somebody snoring, mashallah, they are out. If you wake them up and ask them, what is the khatib talking about? He'll be like, what khatib, right? So that is deep sleep. Just to understand the istalahat first. So one opinion is that all sleep, whether light sleep or deep sleep, even for a second, if you dozed off, it breaks the wudu. And this was the opinion of Ishaq and Hasan al-Basri, the great tabi'i. He took this opinion. And from the Shawafi', Ibn Mundir is Shafi'i, but he is a mujtahid, and he makes a lot of ijtihad. He took this opinion. Then there is an opinion, even if it's a very rare opinion. Some of the ulama said ijma'an, sleep breaks the wudu, but be very careful with saying ijma'. You really have to prove ijma'. That's why Imam Ahmad was very strict on people claiming ijma'. There's actually not ijma' on this issue, because even if Jamhur take it, because there is an opinion from Sa'id ibn Musayyib and a riwayah, even though there is some kalam on it from Abu Musa al-Ashari radiyallahu anhu, that sleep does not break wudu. Tayyib. Third opinion, now these are two contradictory opinions first off, right? Tayyib, what is their adillah? What is their proofs? Don't ever say, I have the dalil, I follow dalil. Okay, yes, you should follow dalil, but don't think you're the only one with the dalil. Everybody has a dalil. Don't think that any madhab or just came up with opinions from thin air, right? Whether their dalil is rajih or not, whether their dalil is the strongest or not, whether their dalil is applicable, that's a different issue. But everybody has adillah. So the first opinion that all sleep breaks wudu, they present the hadith that we mentioned earlier, Safwan Ibn Assal radiallahu anhu hadith, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said about making masha on the khuf, and he said that Rasulullah would ask us to remove them for the major hadath, for ghusl, illa except lakin min gha'id wal bawl wal nawm. So this hadith, as we mentioned, this is authentic narration as reported by Ahmad and At-Tirmidhi and Nisai ibn Majah, Ibn Nahwi, which is famously known as Ibn Mulaqqin, and Badr al-Munir authenticated it. So it's a sahih riwayah. So this riwayah, what does it tell you? That feces or defecating or urinating and sleep. Nawm here is mutlaqan, is general. Nawm. So the first opinion that said that all sleep breaks wudu presented this hadith as a proof. Tayyib. The second opinion that said that sleep does not break wudu at all presented a hadith reported by Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu, and this is again a authentic narration. It's mentioned in Sahih Muslim. And it's in Sahih Muslim, so there is no doubt to it. Which is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I'm going to summarize some of the ahadith for the sake of time. Yani he delayed the Isha, and the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum were sitting hatta na'am al-qawm, yani until they were asleep. They were sitting, waiting for salah, until they were asleep. And then when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came, thumma sallu, yani then they prayed without renewing the wudu. So second opinion said that so many Sahaba were sitting, waiting for salah. They were asleep, sitting, and obviously it's not a deep sleep because they're waiting for salah. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came, he did not order them to make a new wudu, so sleep does not break the wudu at all. Tayyib. Third opinion is sleep of the one whose backside, whose rear end is firm on the ground, does not invalidate the wudu, no matter how long that sleep may be for. Meaning, if somebody sits down and they sleep for 8 hours sitting, their wudu does not get invalidated. And this is the mu'tamid opinion of the Hanafi and Shafi'i madhab. If you look at the Hashiyah ibn Abidin, he said this is the mu'tamid, that as long as you, like for example, in some of the books of the Ahnaf, they give great detail about if you're sitting on a horse and you're going up or down or this, and if you're going up, your back is covered, and if you're going down, your back lifts, and then your wudu is broken, you fall asleep. I don't know how you fall asleep on a horse, but these great details are given. I'm skipping the detail, I'm just giving you the mu'tamid, which is Shafi'i and Hanafi madhab. As long as you're sitting where your backside is got pressure on it, your wudu does not break from sleep no matter how long it is. Tayyib. A fourth opinion is that if you are standing and sitting, then the wudu will be affected if it is a light sleep. Tayyib. Meaning that if you are laying down or you sleep for a long time where you are completely out for a long time, then your wudu is invalidated. But if you are sitting or standing for a short amount of time with sleep, it does not invalidate the wudu. And this is the opinion of the Hanabila, as we mentioned from Zadul Mustaqni. A fifth opinion, Habibi. All right, no problem. Let's take it back. 1. All sleep breaks wudu. This is one opinion from Al-Hasan al-Basri, from Imam al-Ishaq ibn Mundhir. Tayyib. Second, no sleep breaks wudu. Sayyid ibn Musayyib, and a narration that goes back to Abu Musa al-Ashari. 3. Sleep of the one whose rear end is firm on the ground does not invalidate the wudu no matter how long it is, even if it's for 10 hours straight. Tayyib. This is the mu'tamid of the Shafi'i and Hanafi madhab. Tayyib. Fourth opinion, that if you are sitting or standing and it's a light sleep, meaning it's not a very long amount of time, it's a short duration, then it does not invalidate the wudu. But if you are either laying down, or if it's a long period of time where you are unconscious of your actions, meaning when you're deep sleep, then it does invalidate the wudu, and that is the Hanbali opinion. We good? Fifth opinion. A great deal or a great amount or a long period of sleep invalidates the wudu no matter if you're sitting, standing, or sleeping. This is the Maliki opinion. Tayyib. Now let's get to adilla, proofs. Okay? So the first proof gets to be the hadith of Safwan ibn Assal radiallahu anhu. What does that prove? It proves that no sleep, its asal is that it invalidates the wudu. Tayyib? This, because it mentions no mutlaqan. And this hadith is an authentic narration, so there is no doubt that it establishes an asl, that in actuality sleep invalidates. Tayyib. There are other hadith which mention that the eyes are the drawstrings of the anus, so when the eyes are shut, you have to make wudu. And then there is a Hasan riwayah, there's some that criticize it and so on and so on. But this sleep, that hadith is not even needed. With this hadith, we say that the asl of sleep is that it invalidates the wudu. Tayyib. But we have a qarina, we have an exception, which is the hadith in Sahih Muslim from Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu about the Sahaba that were sitting, and as the longer narration mentioned, some of them were standing, dozing off, waiting for salah. Now, that gives us an exception because Rasulullah came and you ordered the salah to stand. He saw the Sahaba were sitting, waiting for salah, asleep. He did not order them to go and make a fresh wudu. Tayyib. So what do we have now? We have that sleep in and of itself, its asal is it invalidates the wudu. But there is a qarina, there is an exception. What's the exception? What's mustasna from it? That if you are waiting for something, meaning as if you are sitting or standing. If you look at this hadith, we cannot deduce from it that the Sahaba were laying down sleeping for hours. Because Rasulullah ﷺ, he did not delay the salah for like 4 or 5 hours. Obviously, if they were still sitting there, it was delayed, but not for a long period of time. And the Sahaba, because they said jalisun, in some of the narration mentioned they were sitting. So we take from it two things. One, it was a short period of time. It was a period of time waiting for salah that was delayed from its time. And second, that they were not laid out. Right? So, what do we find from the adillah? That those who said that all sleep invalidates the wudu do not have a response for this hadith. If you say all sleep, light or deep, all of that invalidates the wudu, how do you respond to this hadith? And those who say that sleep does not invalidate the wudu mutlaqan also don't have a response to the earlier hadith of Safwan radiyallahu anhu. Tayyib? So we say, what is wadih from the adillah? What is clear, sarih from the proofs is that a light sleep while either sitting or standing does not invalidate the wudu based on this. Other than that, any sleep where either you are laid out or you are in that state of a sleep for a long period of time will invalidate the wudu because the exception will not take you out of the asl. Clear? So, a light sleep while either sitting or standing will not invalidate the wudu. A long period of sleeping, even if you're sitting, but you're out for 4 or 5 hours, whatever, and again, we cannot set a particular number. I would love to say 36 minutes, right? But I can't. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not set a particular number. Rather, through this hadith of Anas ibn Malik, we find an exception. So you have to take urf into consideration. The Sahaba came for salah. The time for salah was delayed. Rasulullah came out later. So they were sitting for that duration. It could not have been 4 or 5 hours. This is not the way, you don't pray Isha. For example, if we say Isha is at 9:30 here, and I come here at 9:45 and there's nobody here, you guys will have left. But the Sahaba would wait, but they're not going to go from 9 till midnight or to 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., right? So that means it was a short amount of time that it was delayed. And from the alfaz of the hadith, what is istidlalan? That they were either sitting or standing. They weren't laid out. This wasn't like they were out. So based on this, we say the hukam is correct, which is the fourth opinion that we mentioned, that a light amount of sleep with sitting in a sitting or standing position does not invalidate the wudu, but every other sleep does. Tayyib? Tayyib. ومسح ذكر متصل أو قبل بظهر الكف أو طيب, let's take it one at a time. Now we get to the issue of if somebody touches the private part. And I know this is a kind of a giggly subject for some people, but I'm sure you guys change your clothes and go to the bathroom and stuff, so don't act like this doesn't happen. And in the Sharia, we need to know the ahkam. You don't want to be ignorant You want to be shy, but in a way of still knowing the ahkam of Sharia. So if somebody touches the private, and what do we consider the private here? As the muallif mentions here, that the genitals in the front and back, the anus and the genital in the front, men and women, is included here, and we'll talk about the woman here as well in a minute. With the hand, the dhahar of it, and the button or the batin of it. طيب? The inside of the hand or the outside of the hand. طيب? Meaning, if somebody's elbow touches their private part, this is not included here. This is biyad, with the kaf, with the hand. Yad, again, in Arabic, can go from the tip of your fingers all the way up to and including your elbows. That's why when we talk about ghusl al-yadayn, it includes all of this. Kaf in Arabic is this palm. طيب? Now, we get into an opinion where there are some khilaf as well. So first understand the Surah al-Mas'ala. Yani what is the Mas'ala we're discussing? This is the next rabi', yani the fourth thing that invalidates the wudu, which is if somebody touches their private with يعني either the inside or the outside of their hand. طيب. One opinion is that with the inside of the palm, if you touch, it invalidates the wudu, but not with the outside, with the upper. Dhahar is the back side, batan is this side. This is one opinion, and this is the opinion of the Malikiyya and the Shawafi'. Then there is an opinion that touching the private part does not invalidate the wudu at all, whether it's with the right, with front or inside, and this is the opinion of the Hanafi madhab. I'll tell you a funny story. We were with some brothers out in what's called khuruj, yani tabligh. And this is why they say we don't discuss masail, but they do discuss masail, right? So they were discussing ghusl, and one of the brothers who was explaining, he was talking about, he was Shafi'i. So he said that because they don't study what is the difference of madhab, they just know whatever they know. So the brother said that from the etiquette of ghusl is once you have made wudu, when you're putting your silwar on or your izar on, you have to be very careful, because if your hand touches your private, your wudu breaks. The brother, Mufti nowadays, was with us, and he was our Amir at the time, our brother Shakib. He said, "What? That's not true. I touch it all the time." Meaning, he meant that it does not invalidate the wudu according to the Hanafi madhab, but the way it came out was interesting. So these are khilaf between the madahib. This is the opinion of the Maliki and Shawafi' that if it touches from the inside of the kaf, not the outside, it invalidates the wudu. According to the Ahnaf, inside, outside does not invalidate the wudu. Tayyib. And then there is a third opinion, as we read here, which is that it does invalidate the wudu if you touch the private without a barrier, with either the inside or the outside. Tayyib. Now we get to the adillah. What are the proofs here? First we find the hadith of Bushra bint Safwan, where, and there are a few different narrations of it, but in the end of it, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam clearly said in the hadith, "Man massa dhakarahu falyatawadda." Whoever touches their private has to perform wudu. Now this hadith has a riwayah that says farjuhu, an opening which would include for men, women, front and back. Male, female, front and back, the anus and the front genitalia. This riwayah has been reported by Imam Ahmad and Abu Dawud and At-Tirmidhi and An-Nisa'i and Ibn Majah, Ibn Mulaqqin, who's known as Ibn Nahwi, in Badr al-Munir authenticated it, Shaykh al-Albani authenticated it through different narrations, and no doubt it has supporting evidences from many ahadith. In fact, I I spent a lot of time on this issue because you will find some seemingly contradictory narrations. And I found more than 10 Sahaba that reported this or the ma'nawi, to the meaning of this hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, including Umar ibn Khattab, Ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Umar, Anas ibn Malik, Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, Abu Huraira, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas radiyallahu anhu, Jabir, Aisha radiyallahu anha, and Bushra bin Safwan radiyallahu anhum. I found 10 different routes through many chains, but through 10 different Sahaba. So this is a very strong narration. Imam al-Bukhari said about this, Asha shay fil bab. And this is the strongest hadith on this issue. Tayyib, but those, for example, the Hanafi madhab, why do they not accept this hadith? Well, they have a dalil. And their dalil is a hadith about a Sahabi that came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he asked that if somebody touches their dhakr, their private, would they make the wudu'? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, why would they? No, meaning in istidlalan, innama huwa bad'u, it is a part of minka, from you. It is just a juz minka, it's a part from you. So why would you make wudu'? So the Ahnaf took that hadith, and they said, because Rasulullah ﷺ said, is this a part of your body? Then there is no wudu. Wudu is not needed. The Shawafi' and the Malikiya and the Hanabila took the other hadith. Some of the A'imma and Ulama, like Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah, they brought another opinion, which is they said that if it's touching bishahwa, then it breaks the wudu. If it's bidun shahwa, then it doesn't. And I used to think this was a very good opinion because it brought the adillah together. But upon a lot of time and research, and you don't want to know how many nights were spent on this issue, there is a book called Mukhtalaf al-Hadith by Sheikh Abdullah al-Fawzan, not Sheikh Saleh, but Abdullah al-Fawzan, which brings together Imam Ahmad discussing seemingly contradictory hadith. Because here you have one hadith that says that if you touch the private, you have to make wudu. The other hadith saying that why would you make wudu? It's just a part of your body. So it's seemingly contradictory. So these books, they discuss these issues. Ibn Qutaybah and others have this as well. When I looked through this, 3 things made me change my opinion to say that touching the private does break the wudu. Okay. First, the ahadith for man masha dhakrahu falyatawadda, or giving that meaning, are much more in number. Meaning more Sahaba, more chains, to a very great amount. Meaning, I told you there's 10 Sahaba that I found ahadith through. Each one of them had many chains, so the chains are a lot. Secondly, no doubt that these ahadith are stronger sanadan. Not only are they more, but the reporters are stronger, and that's why Imam al-Bukhari said, Asha shay fil bab. Third, the wording of the hadith about إنما هذا بدعة minka shows that this is at a time where this hukm had not been revealed. Meaning Rasulullah didn't say la. He didn't just say no, it does not break your wudu. He said it's just a part of your body. And the other ahadith are very specific about this issue. So this is why Ibn Qutaybah and Imam Ahmad and other A'imma, Ibn Mulaqqin and others, they found this to be an issue of nasikh and mansukh. And they proved this from the Sahaba who reported these ahadith. Showing the ahadith about the man who Rasulullah said is part of your body was from Sahaba that were earlier, and those that reported the hadith about the masha and the dhakr breaking the wudu were later. Great amounts of research, but this is the third issue that shows nasikh and mansukh. So, what is rajih? First off, is that if you touch the private, then it does break your wudu. Tayyib, now gets the issue of dhahir and batin. Here the ahadith don't mention dhahir or batin. Right? So everything that can be considered masah, touch, would have to be linguistically, as Ibn Qudama and others have mentioned, whether you touch something with the back of the hand or the front of the hand, lamasa or mas, here is applicable. So what is rajih is as the muallif mentions, is that if anybody touches the private, now he says muttasil, what does that take away? Is anything that's qata', anything that's been cut off, which is again a very rare occasion that somebody's private would be cut off and they would be touching it. But in Islam we do know that there are such situations, but usually it's discussing somebody's body that is salim, it's together. So here, as the muallif mentioned, that touching the private. Now, whether it is the front genitals or back genitals, whether it's male or female. Why? Because when the other riwayah meant farjuhu, then it includes all of that. طيب? With the front zahir or batin of the hand will come under masah, under what is considered touch, in the Arabic language. So it does invalidate the wudū. And that's inshallah clear on this one. Move forward, inshallah. طيب. Now we get to a mas'ala that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but it's لمسهما من خنثى المشكل الذكر أو قبل أو فرج أيضا أو لمس ذكر ذكره الخنثى المشكل وأنثى قبله الخنثى المشكل لشهوة فيهما. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made, I'm sure all of us here inshallah, and most of insan, where it's very, you're born without a lot of physical defects, alhamdulillah. But from the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, some people are born with some defects. Then one of the hikmah of that is for you to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved you from that, right? There are those that are called khuntha. Now, what is khuntha? In this country that we live in, and in the West today, we have a very strange, and not just in the West, it's everywhere nowadays, we have a very strange idea. Somebody is born a man, they're a man, physically, they're a man, and they decide somewhere down the line, I'm a woman. You can't choose your gender. I'm sorry. It's not like wearing different shirts. It's a biological, physical thing, right? You can feel like a woman if you want to, but you're not a woman. I could feel like I'm a tiger. I could be like, I'm a tiger, but I'm not a tiger. I'm a human being. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made me a human being. I could act like a tiger. I could put stripes on myself. You guys would probably think I'm crazy, but I'm still a human being. I could say, address me like a tiger. Tell me, fahad or asad or whatever. But in the end, I'm still a human being. That's reality. If you're born a male, you're a male. That's what Allah chose for you, that's what you are. You can't choose it. Right? If you're born a female, you're born a female. That's in the Sharia, that's in fitrah, that's in basic human logic. That's just a fact. So we're not talking about transgender or people choosing their gender or a man dressing up like a woman. That in the Sharia is all haram. Any man that dresses like a woman or in a feminine manner, there is the la'na of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on them. Any woman who dresses like a man or in a male type of manner, there is the la'na of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on them. We don't want to shake hands with them. We don't want to sit with them. We just want to give them nasiha, so may Allah guide them. But that is not discussed in Sharia books, illa bil hudud, except for punishments and la'na of Allah. But there is a different case where very few people, it's a very minute population, but they are there who are born with either both genitals or neither, right? Those type of situations are there. And the Sharia, because it's applicable for all times and all places, it does discuss those. So amongst that, there is two types of khuntha. One is where you can clearly tell one is more dominant than the other. Meaning, and there are, I don't want to give examples of people in the US, but there are famous people that you may have heard of that in the US were born like that, where they had movie actors and so on, that they were born with both genitals, and one was dominant, so the other one was removed surgically, and khalas, then they live. And that's the Sharia. Whichever one is dominant is where the hukam goes. But then there is khunsa al-mushkil, where it's difficult to tell which one is dominant. Now this is not an issue today, because today we can X-ray and MRIs or whatever else to figure out whether there's a rahm or not, and we can clearly know which way the person should go, and whichever way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them the most of they will go. So inshallah it's not an issue. But in the olden times when they didn't have this technology, you had this issue of temporarily not knowing which way this person would go. So here the hukam for that type of person, that if he touches both of those, then the wudu is invalid. And if a man touches such a thing on the male side of it, then their wudu is invalid, and the female for the female, but that's with shahwa. Not going to go detail into that because alhamdulillah we don't have that issue, but it is interesting to know that the Sharia does deal with even those types of situations. طيب أو مسح ومسح إمرة بشهوة. طيب, then we get into the issue of touching a man touching a woman, or a woman touching a man with desire. طيب. So now we're not talking about genitals. Genitals issues done. Right? That did not have to be accompanied with desire. طيب. But it was, what was the shurut? With the hand, not an elbow or your leg or something like this, but with the inner or outer of the palm. That invalidates wudu, whether with desire or not. But now we get into issue of a man touching a woman or a woman touching a man with desire. And here we get into some khilaf again. طيب. There is an opinion which is that such a touching, even with desire, if a man touches a woman or a woman touches a man with desire, in and of itself does not invalidate the wudu. And this is the Hanafi opinion. And in it they present a few adillah. What is the dalil? They present the dalil that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was making salah, the authentic hadith, and Aisha radhiyallahu anha, she said, I couldn't see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so I reached out with my hand and I touched his foot. When I touched his foot, I realized he was there because there was no light and he was making salah in the night, and he continued his salah. So they said, if a mere touch would invalidate the wudu, then here Rasulullah would have to break the salah because Aisha radhiyallahu anha touched him. And they present the hadith where Rasulullah kissed his wife and then he went to go make salah. They said this is bishahwa. Tayyib. Then there is the opinion of the Shafi'i madhab that any touch, if a man touches a woman, Haythami and others have made clear, this is the Mu'tabid, Al even Shafi'i discusses this, rahmatullah alayh, that if a man touches a woman without shahwa even, no desires, it invalidates the wudu. Lamastum an-nisa in the Quran is their dalil in Surah Al-Ma'idah. Tayyib. Now we get to a third opinion, which is what is presented here, that lamas, the touching without desire, does not invalidate the wudu, but with desire does invalidate the wudu. Tayyib. So let's go back to the adillah. We don't want to reject adillah. You know what? One of the things that another one of my pet peeves is people that give a dars and all they say, well, we have this dalil, and they just go forward. Well, if you have this dalil, somebody else has a different dalil. Right? So why should I follow you over them? We want to always review the adillah. Tayyib. So when we talk about lamas having to do with the nisa in the Quran, many of the mufassirin of Quran from the Sahaba explain this to be a touch bishahwa. This is the first adillah. So this ayah would not be a proof for those from the Shafi'i, for example, madhab, that said that this includes every touch. طيب? So that's one. Now we get to the Ahnaf. Regarding the ahadith about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's foot being touched by Aisha radhiyallahu anha, there's another hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was making salah and he touched the foot of Aisha and moved it to make sujood, because how small the ghurfa of Aisha radhiyallahu anha. This is the zuhd of our Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he had to move the feet of Aisha radhiyallahu anha. So here again he touched. Both of those are duna shahwa. They're without shahwa. Because if somebody's making salah and you touch them, it's not shahwa. Or if you're moving somebody's feet, it's not shahwa. Tayyib. Regarding the hadith of Aisha radhiyallahu anha, and there are other Ummahat al-Mu'mineen in different rawayat and so on and so on, regarding Rasulullah kissing one of his wives and going for salah, that hadith is da'if. that hadith is da'if. So when you have an ayah from Quran that shows shahwa, you cannot take a da'if hadith to make tashri'h of it. So what is rajih, that does not reject the ayah of Quran or the tafsir of it, and it does not reject the sahih ahadith of lamas, is that if a man touches a woman with shahwa, then it invalidates the wudu'. If a man touches the woman without shahwa, it does not. The Shafi'i madhab has many opinions within it, but I was reading myself once some of the more in-depth books of the Shawafid that give different of madhahib, like Al-Majmu'. It said even if a husband touches his wife without shahwa, it invalidates the wudu'. Even if a brother touches his sister, because shahwa is not a shart. And this is something very difficult. One of the brothers that I know well was strict Shafi'i. He studied Shafi'i madhab, was very strict on the Shafi'i madhab. The same brother that was giving the tadhkira earlier that I was saying. He was very strict on this issue. Even when he went to the stores here in America, when the lady would give the change, he would tell her to put the change down, and he would bring his sleeve. And even when his own mother would wake him up, he would tell her that don't touch me when you're waking me up, just yell at me and so on. Very strict, mashallah. Until he got married. Until he got married. When he got married, I told him, how's it going? He goes, I became Shambali. I said, what's Shambali? He goes, I'm Shafi and everything else, but in this masa I'm Hanbali because I cannot go to sleep with wudu'. How do you go to sleep with wudu' then? Right? So, khair, with the adilla that we have, لمس النساء بالشهوة أو لمس الرجل من امرأة ها نواقض الوضوء, and it does invalidate the wudu' because it brings all the adilla together. طيب لا مسح الشهر, شعر the hair is not included in this. والسن or the teeth, or ظفر or the nails. Why? Because it's a very deep istidlal that I'm not going to go very deep into, but these things are not considered as a part of the regular body. And we discussed this under najasat before. We discussed this about animals, and we'll discuss it again. For example, if you cut the wool of a sheep, you don't say you killed it. You didn't take a part of it out. It's something that is independent. Even when you dye your hair, is not considered to be dead, and so on from the Shari'i perspective. If somebody gets a haircut, you don't say their hair died, right? But if you get your hand cut, a part of your body has been cut. Same thing with the nails, it's something that is cut, or same thing with the teeth. So those things would not come on al-lamas in this sense. And there is linguistic and istidlal and all of that, but this is something that is understood. Here the muallif is going to give you basically 6 exceptions to lamas. Or the child, amrad here is the young person when they haven't reached bulugh. If you touch a little child, there is no doubt that anybody with some fitra will not have any shahwa, so that would not be considered to be here. Why? Also because the Quran, it says an-nisa, and a younger girl is not considered from the nisa. هي جارية أو a young boy would be a ghulam, and so on. So children under puberty would not be in this category. ولا مال حائل, and neither with something that has a barrier. Meaning if you touch somebody and they're wearing clothes, that's not considered lamas, in linguistically. So that would also be an exception. If there is a barrier, even bishahwa, that does not invalidate. Now, if it causes madi to eject, then obviously ijma'an, that invalidates the wudu'. But we're not talking about that. Tayyib, nor the malmus, nor the one who is touched, even if it caused shahwa. Meaning, if a husband touches the wife, he's the one touching the wife, it invalidates his wudu' if it's bishahwa, but not hers. Because the Quran is for the one touching, not the one who's touched. Malmus is not there, so we don't have a dalil for malmus. So the one who is touched does not invalidate, unless it causes madi or something, then that's a different issue. And wudu is invalidated. Now we're getting to the sadis, the 6th thing, yarhamakullah, with the ghusl al-mayyit. If you do ghusl for the death, it invalidates the wudu. Now here you have 3 opinions as well. One opinion that if you do ghusl for the dead, it requires ghusl. One opinion that if you do ghusl for the dead, it does not require ghusl or wudu. And a third opinion, which is the correct opinion, that if you do ghusl for the dead, it requires wudu and not ghusl. And I'm not going to go deep for the sake of time, but in a very short manner to understand. If you perform ghusl, those ahadith that mention that you should perform ghusl, mawqufan mostly, there is weakness in some of them, and the tashrih of them, as many ulama said, ghasala here is not for ghusl but for wudu. Those that say that there is no ghusl or wudu cannot respond to the adillah. But the hadith, and there are many from Sahaba, but the one that I'm going to mention that's very clear is the hadith of Abu Rabah, Ata ibn Abi Rabah, who's mentioned that Su'ila ibn Abbas, Ata, the great tabi'i, he said, I asked Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma about the one who gives ghusl for the dead, should they perform ghusl? He said, la. He said, no. Very clear. He said, but what should they do? He said, lakin al-wudu. But they should perform wudu. This hadith is very sarih, and it is a sahih hadith. It's reported by Abdul Razzaq in his Musannaf and Al-Bayhaqi in Sunan Al-Kabir, and isnaduhu sahih, authentic narration. And the beautiful thing about this hadith, it is very specific. There is no ambiguity to it. Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma with the sahih chain clarified that ghusl is not required, but wudu is required. So this is what is rajih. If you give ghusl to the dead, it invalidates your wudu, but does not make wajib on you to perform ghusl. طيب, the next سابع أكل اللحم خاص من الجمور جزور هو الإبل يعني الجبل الجمل إبل, this is all words for the camel. Eating the meat in khas, يعني will explain being from the camel. Eating the camel's meat invalidates the wudu. This is the seventh, sabi'. And this is a matter of khilaf. The Jamhur al-Ulama from the Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, Madahib said it does not. Only the Hanabila, from the Mufradat of the Hanabila, they said it does. Tayyib. What about Adillah? I looked to the books of the Ahnaf and Shawaf and Malikiyya for Adillah. The first Adillah they present, they said where is the dalil that it does? Tayyib. So that's one. Second, they said there is a hadith that cooked meat would require wudu, and that hadith was mansukh, yani it was abrogated later. So that means this is also abrogated. But this is a ajib thing. Why? Because there are two different things. One is about cooked meat, one is about camel's meat. Like, how did you put those together? Tayyib. And they mentioned some aqwal from Sahaba and so on. These are the adillah. Let's go to the Hanabila from the Mufradat, from the unique opinion of the Hanabila. In this you have the first hadith from Jabir ibn Samura radiyallahu anhu, that a rajul came and asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, هل توضع, يعني do we make wudu min luhum al-ghanam, from the sheep's meat? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, in shayta, if you would like, fatawaddu, if you like you can make wudu, if you don't, fala wudu, yani you do not have to make wudu. That means that there is no wujub. He said, what about luhum al-ibl? What about the meat of the camel? Rasulullah said, na'am, fatawadda min luhum al-ibl. This hadith is reported by many a'imma, but the one I'll mention is Sahih Muslim. Imam Muslim in his Sahih. So this is in Sahih Muslim, no doubt to the authenticity of this hadith. And it is supported by the hadith of Barra ibn Azib radiyallahu anhu, that is reported by Ahmad and Abu Dawud and At-Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah and Shaykh Albani, for example, in Jami al-Sahih authenticated it, and Ibn Nahwi and Ibn Mulaqqin and Zayla'i and all of the Aimma across authenticated as well. Tayyib. These independent ahadith through many chains authentically establish that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam clearly specified wudu for camel's meat. And there is no nasikh for this. There is no hadith that shows that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam abrogated this. Tell you why camel meat? La adri wallahu a'lam. And we leave this to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger. Why? Because Rasulullah. I read a master's thesis by one of the brothers who gave a great detailed explanation about this issue and about the meat of the camel and how it's different and its effect on the body and so on. But ikhwan fillah, why do we need to go into all of that? We have ahadith, more than one ahadith through multiple chains, is from Sahih Muslim that mentions camel's meat. So, khalas, this is it. Now, can we say eating the camel's liver invalidates the wudu? Huh? What about camel liver or camel's eyeballs, if you're Abdullah, right? Or maybe kidney or heart. People eat all kinds of things, brains, tongues. I'm not with it, but whatever, right? Does that invalidate the wudu? Come on, shuyukh, what happened? Everybody asleep? La, it does not. Why? Because luhum, lahm. The hadith specifies lahm. Every version of it, the meat, and linguistically the liver and things do not come under lahm, so those things of the camel do not, but the meat of the camel does, because we based on adillah. Lahm al-khinzir is called richer in the Quran, yes, but there are other hadith that make tashrih that all of the khinzir is najis, so that's a different issue. Here with this issue of nawaqid al-wudu for the camel's meat, the ahadith that are sahih and sarih only mention luhum, the meat of the ibl or the jamal, the camel, so that is what invalidates the wudu. The last thing I'm going to mention, كل ما أوجب الغسلا, يعني everything that obligates one to perform ghusl, ujib, يعني it obligates al-wudu illa al-maut. Hayd, nifas, somebody becomes murtad, may Allah protect us, and yani, all of these issues that if a murtad wants to come back to Islam, then he has to do ghusl. Yani, if somebody is in a state of hayd or nifas or junub or other states, they have to do ghusl. All of that also obligates them to do wudu. It invalidates the hadath al-akbar, but also invalidates the hadath al-asghar. Illa al-maut, except maut. Why not maut? Even though it is mustahab to perform wudu for the one who is dead, doing the ghusl for them, but it's not wajib, because there is no dalil for wujub of wudu for the maut. Okay? So inshallah, we'll stop here. We've mentioned 8 of the nawaqid of wudu, and this is what's in the matan. Next, we will talk about when you have doubt about your tahara and what to do, and what things are stopped from the one who needs to perform wudu.